St. Thomas Aquinas is one of the most recognizable Christian intellectual voices. We have just done an episode covering Aquinas' cosmology of the ladder of being, and we spent a decent amount of time dealing with various levels of the soul. In this episode, we will cover the questions that Aquinas gave consideration to in Quaestio Disputata de Anima, the disputated questions of life or the soul, and give a closer and more thorough view and explanation of what makes souls distinctive. Aquinas argues that what distinguishes souls is not objects, but abilities, the abilities of the soul and their purpose, or their telos. It is again important to understand the interlinked cosmology and world of Aquinas as opposed to our post-Baconian functional dualism of separation. Objects of the soul, which seem to mark out its distinctiveness, like color or differences, correspond sometimes to different abilities, hearing and sight, and sometimes to only one, imagination of mind. So differences in object don't cause diversity in ability, Aquinas writes. The abilities that souls possess are not found in objects. They are interior to the nature of the soul. In trying to tease out his position, Aquinas argues every genus has its fundamental pair of opposing properties. So if we are going to differentiate sense powers by diverse genera of passive qualities, there should be different sense powers wherever there are diverse pairs of opposing qualities. Passive and active senses are not the result of objects, but rather the differentiated functional abilities of the soul interior to their nature. The encounter with world objects don't distinguish the soul either. Rather, the encounter with objects in the world magnifies the differentiated abilities inherent in the soul's nature. For instance, when an animal or a human comes up to a rock, an object in nature, that magnifies through our encounter with it what our soul's ability is. The animal, which simply possesses a sort of emotional intelligence and sense feeling, will not contemplate why the rock is there. The intellectual principle in the human soul, while we also possess the abilities of the animal soul, leads to humans contemplating why the rock is there. Thus, the encounter with the object is what brings about an understanding of the distinctiveness of our souls. It magnifies the differences. In another way, we could see it this way. The tree, a tree, may magnify the ability of sight, which is an ability of the level of life associated with sense awareness. For instance, vegetative life will have no amplification by the tree because they cannot see the tree. An animal possessing the animal soul, sense awareness, can see the tree and therefore act accordingly, thus magnifying the difference of the soul within. Aquinas establishes, predictably, 3 levels to the soul's activity. Those 3 levels of soul activity are vegetative powers, sense powers, and intellectual powers, each corresponding with the distinctiveness of the soul based on its abilities. What marks out the distinctiveness, or what distinguishes souls, are, again, their inherent intrinsic abilities. The powers of the vegetative soul mark it out as different from the powers of the animal soul, and the powers of the intellect mark it out as different from the powers of the animal and vegetative soul. Concerning the 3 levels of the soul activities, Aquinas argues that soul activity can be broken down in 2 ways. In a manner of acting and in what gets done. In matter of acting, all soul activity transcends the action of workings of nature and non-living things, because soul activity is life activity, and living means self-moving. so that all soul activity comes from interior intrinsic agency. Note here, there is a sharp distinction between Catholic and Reform anthropology. Regarding the fall of man, Catholicism, including Augustine, never taught total depravity. Why? Because all soul activity comes from interior agency. Total depravity would mean a complete absence of interior agency, which has been lost as a consequence of the fall in Calvinist theology. Calvin and the Calvinists argue that human agency is totally and completely moved by the Spirit of God. This is how God is in total control of all things, including the good actions of the elect and the bad actions of the reprobate. Human agency does not, in the Calvinist strict position, really exist since it comes from God. The Catholic position, being free will, leads to a soul wounded from knowledge of all things in perfection, but still capable of some degree of choosing and understanding. Since soul activity for Aquinas is in movement, power or ability, choice or action, the powers of the vegetative soul are what Aquinas considers natural powers, and humans possess an aspect of the vegetative soul, our natural powers. The vegetative soul is what all life possesses, including, again, fallen humans, and this can never be taken away. The vegetative powers of the soul are the lower powers, or the lowest powers of all powers, corresponding with generation, growth, decline, etc. By being fed, our bodies grow. Our bodies have, therefore, the vegetative power of the soul. At the level of sense awareness, however, Aquinas writes, which suffices for animal life, 5 things are needed. Those 5 things, those 5 powers or abilities, are particular senses, the 5 senses, touch, taste, smell, hearing, and sight, general root sensitivity, fancy, judgment, and memory. Particular senses and general root sensitivity are universal to all animals. Fancy, judgment, and memory, while also universal to the animal soul, is where the cleavage between animals and humans and their diversity eventually emerges. For animals, fancy, judgment, and memory come from their natural instincts endowed by God through their animal soul. However, for humans, these sense powers are the result of research and discussion, or inquiry. In another way of understanding it, fancy, judgment, and memory to humans can be refined over time and through intellectual capacities. Memory, for instance, in other animals works without enquiry, but in human beings with enquiry and study, so that human beings not only have memory, but reminiscence. In the animal capacities for fancy, judgment, and memory, which humans share, humans go beyond mere fancy, judgment, and memory by including intellectual capacities which enhance fancy, judgment, and memory. The animal use of fancy, judgment, and memory is simply contained to their animal nature. They are, in a word, programmed for fancy, judgment, and memory in the basic sense, and they have no capacity for refining these abilities. The highest form of sense awareness, according to Aquinas, is motive power and effective and aggressive emotions. For Aquinas, animals, even dogs and cats, are motivated by some degree of love. Their aggressive abilities is not a deficiency of love, but points, perhaps in a corrupt form, to some degree of want for emotional need, affectivity. Affective emotion empowers us to enjoy things delightful to the senses. By contrast, and again, refer back to Aquinas and his discussion on opposing properties, aggressive emotion fights to repel obstacles and gain access to what it naturally enjoys. Aggressive power, or action aims at love and enjoyment. Hence, affective emotion stands superior to aggressive emotion, and the motive power of sense awareness is enjoyment. Enjoyment is what moves all motive and affective powers. Affectivity, though, the true embodiment of love, should never bring harm to others. That is an intellectual principle to the human soul that animals do not possess because they are incapable of knowing the moral law. We see then that the distinguishing characteristic of the plant and animal soul is in their powers, not their object. Where the plant soul has the power of generation and growth, the animal soul has the power of sense awareness. And the 5 powers of sense awareness Aquinas outlines and elaborates on. Most essential to the animal soul is its power of particular senses, moving all the way up to a natural instinct or cognitive ability to form notions and concepts, so that the motive power achieves a degree of enjoyment for the animal soul, or the body. The rational soul, the human soul, is marked by intellectual powers, and these powers are in agent intellect and receptive intellect. Agent intellect is the sole activity of movement, or the will, or agency. Agent intellect is the rational soul desiring something. Receptive intellect is the part of the rational soul that takes in what agent intellect is seeking after and begins to try to understand, tease out, parse, etc. The agent intellect, the desire for something, is tied to the receptive intellect that produces thinking. Again, we see the opposing qualities of the intellect at work. Agent intellect desires. Receptive intellect receives what is desired and tries to understand it. For Aquinas, what the rational soul desires is knowledge, and knowledge is consummated in the receptive intellect. Thus, the receptive intellect is superior to the agent intellect. When agent intellect finds what it desires, and the receptive intellect takes in what is found, the intellect is either satiated or unsatiated. If it is satiated, it takes in the agent intellect, and you have enjoyment. If it is unsatiated or unsatisfied, the receptive intellect repels or rejects what the agent intellect desires, and the search goes on. This, for Aquinas, is how truth emerges in human agency. Agent intellect seeks the good and desires to understand the good. Each soul, he writes, has a primary goal. For the human soul, what it understands to be good, which all its other goals serve, so that what is sensed as good serves what we understand to be good. The rational soul's power, that which most definitively distinguishes it from plant and animal souls, is, quote, the soul's ability to understand. The power of the rational soul is in understanding. Man is an understanding or thinking being, and the reason why we are an understanding and thinking being is because we possess agent intellect and the receptive will, and how they work together to produce an understanding of satisfaction for good things which produce happiness in life, or, more specifically, produce love in life. Thus we see from Aquinas the 3 levels of the soul distinguished by their interior powers. The plant soul aims to generate life. This is common to everything that possesses a soul, for everything that possesses a soul aims to generate life. The animal soul aims to embody or feel and feel affectivity, sense awareness, and emotion. The human soul aims to know the good and the true, i.e. God. The human soul also includes the ability to generate life and to embody emotion and affections through an enhancement by the knowledge of good and truth. Thus, you see again how aspects of the animal soul are refined to perfection through the human soul, because we have the ability to refine our emotional needs through knowledge of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And again, you must understand how the distinguishing characteristics of the soul are in the interior reality, or the teleology of the soul, and not in the object. For instance, if we go back to the plant soul, which aims to generate life, the distinctive quality of plant life is not in the object of grass or trees or bushes. They all possess the same kind of soul, the plant soul, and the plant soul aims to generate life. The distinguishing characteristics within the animal soul are not to be found in the different objects and material manifestations of animals, but in what the animal soul aims to embody, to feel, the emotional sensitivity, sense awareness. And this is possessed by all animals, regardless of how they appear on earth, as dogs, cats, etc. And the human soul, the distinguishing characteristic for it, is the intellectual principle of being able to know and to understand. And this is true regardless of your skin color, regardless of how tall you are, regardless of how old you are. To conclude, what are the three levels of life then to the soul? They are the three powers of the soul: plant life, animal life, and rational life. Each level of life, each level of these souls, have powers particular to them, which intersect together in their own ways to reflect and embody the beauty, love, and goodness of God. What then permeates the cosmos? What is the mediation that links the power of the souls to their particular ends? According to Aquinas, it is love, because love is what is common to all levels of the soul. Love generates, love enjoys, love understands. The love entailed in generation is found in the plant soul. The love that enjoys through feelings and emotions is what is found in the animal soul. And love, which understands the world and understands why enjoyment is important, and enhancement of the emotional needs and the feelings and the sense awareness of animals, is what human beings have through their soul, through their intellects. Love calls all things to it through their distinctive ability. Love, then, is, for Aquinas, the world soul, which moves all things in a symphonic waltz of life to it. Love as generation, love as enjoyment, love as understanding brings us to the reality of love itself. And as Aquinas and Christian theology has always maintained, love is God.